not even in your business. They got it. Oh, Demetrius came to the ring. He showed up and he keeps showing up. Somebody's gonna get it back to whoever you're stalking. Canelo. You have to be a serial stalker, right? To the point where they're gonna be trying to keep you out of the building. You got your credentials, you got your ticket. Eventually they gotta play. They gotta talk to somebody. Hagler wore that hat called War. I wore it in New York when I fought Tito. Black, you remember it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Look at that. That means something. I understand. That's what I'm saying. If you look at the Tito fight, I had black and white hats in it with the white letters. So I had War. I don't know if you remember. I had War. That's what it was. You must be a serial stalker. That's why I told you to bring me over here to tell you that. I want to tell you you're fed something. Closed mouth, you never get fed. You can be humble. You can be like, I'm just going to wait till they knock on my door. They knock. You're too dangerous. You're a threat. Why would I do that? Why would they do that? Guys like Hagler's guy like me, we be pulling from when we going to do it? But they're not cut from their cloth. You got to be a little bit of what you are now. And a lot about what you was, what they was back then. That means not only heart, but guts to fight anybody in your division. You don't care who it is, as long as they got something to offer, like you do. Always remember, you open your mouth up because you got to feed people. And first you got to feed yourself. They're not going to knock on your door. I'm telling you. Now they knock on your door if they see something that they can explore or something they ain't really like that. They're not going to knock on your door voluntarily. When somebody say you haven't done anything,
not just a commemoration of a boxing legend. It is a celebration.
If you haven't done anything, it should be easy payday for you.
A truly undisputed man.
No one picks a tough fight just because. They either fight because they've been called out on it, or who they are. You heard that up there on stage. Are you that guy? Are you that guy? No, are you that guy? Yes or no?
There you go.
Make sure I get my ticket.
Yes, sir.
Don't leave me out.
Yes, sir.
I see. I mean that though. It's real talk. I've always told you this is the first time we had a conversation. Stop that, man. This is when you first turned pro.
To give honor to this champion, let us also celebrate to mold ourselves into the masters of our own.
What's your next fight coming up?
Let us shoot up anyway. Let us
Former fighter, former Canelo promoter with Golden Boy, Bernard Hopkins, the alien, the executioner, advises Demetrius Booboo Andrade to keep stalking Canelo, be a serial stalker, and go after Canelo like he did after the win over Billy Joe Saunders. We're going to talk about that in this video. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel for the latest and greatest in boxing. Now, you guys seen the clip at the beginning. Bernard Hopkins, I don't know what the event was. They were in the outdoor setting. You've seen Paul Andrade, Demetrius Andrade's dad, and Bhop, the legend, Demetrius Andrade. And Bhop was trying to give Andrade some gems, saying like, you got to do like the throwback fighters, myself, Hagler. And he warns Demetrius Andrade that you're a boogeyman. Nothing's going to come to you easy. That you have to continue doing what you've been doing and keep stalking Canelo, you know, like a mountain lion, like a puma. You got to stalk your prey if you really want it, and that's the only way you'll get the fight. Basically, you guys seen the clip, but he basically said because they know you're a threat. Now, funny enough, I've been saying the same thing for years. Demetrius Booboo Andrade and Canelo could have been fought. At one point, Demetrius Andrade called Canelo Alvarez a bitch at 154. Canelo did nothing. When Andrade had the WBO belt, Canelo seemingly was not interested until he was later relieved of his belt due to inactivity, I think is the reason they cited. And it fell into the hands of Liam Smith. And then Canelo was all about that. That was his last fight at 54. Then Canelo moved from 54, 55 Canelo weight. I was born ready. And he moved up to 164.5, fought Chavez. Then he moved back down to 160. He's toggled between 160, 168, 175. Said he wanted to be undisputed at 160. And for some reason, after declaring that's what he wanted, he ended up fighting Kovalev and moved to 175. Kovalev was coming off a quick turnaround and a fight where he was almost stopped. And that was the Anthony Yard fight. All of a sudden, Canelo abandoned his responsibilities at 160 and decided to move up. He thought that would be the best thing for him. You know, whilst at 160, the WBC is who he had beef with a couple years before around the Chavez Jr. fight time. Canelo Alvarez became this brand new position within the WBC called the franchise title, which allowed him to avoid and duck a fight with Jamal Charlo and not be relieved of his obligations as a champion. The WBC says Canelo has done so much, he's proven so much, he's so valuable to the game that we don't want to stifle him and prevent his career from going on by having him fight mandatories, things like that. So Jamal Charlo is off the radar. He's the franchise champion. Ironically enough, Canelo Alvarez later fought against a mandatory that the WBC had called Avni Yildirim, Average Pilgrim, right? So it's like at 160, when there was a fight that the whole world was clamoring for with Jamal Charlo or even Andrade, those fights he would have had to go through to be undisputed, but they didn't happen. But all of a sudden, he's relieved of the mandatory duties with Jamal Charlo, but has mandatories at 168 in a less than desired fight with Yildirim, coming off a 2-year layoff and a loss, etc. So we know what the situation is. There's going to be a lot of questions regarding Canelo Alvarez. Now, I still stand by what I said previously. Demetrius Andrade, he was at this fight, Canelo Saunders, in Texas. I thought it was a sturdy Canelo win. Some people, for whatever reason, thought that Billy Joe Saunders could be slick enough and beat Canelo. I never seen that, but I thought it was a solid performance. I gave Canelo really most of the rounds, and you know, it looked like it had a decent turnout. You never know with Eddie Hearn Productions if the turnout is cap or how many tickets they comped and stuff like that. So I thought it was all in all. So I do believe Demetrius Andrade running up on him. I still stand by what I said previously. I feel it fell a bit flat. It was a bit flat because he picked the fight where Canelo did, fought who people thought was legit or maybe a guy who could beat him. Allegedly, they had 70,000 people. And more importantly, as I've always stated, Andrade was up there getting kicked out by his own promoter. Promoter Eddie Hearn was like, not now, Demetrius, not now. Nick, calling security on Andrade. So I thought that was an extremely bad look for Andrade. Just him and his dad were yelling like, hey, we'll get you. And then Canelo was like, and that was the first time that some people even heard Canelo Alvarez speak English. So it was kind of a viral moment where Canelo Alvarez showed you a little bit more of his personality and, spoke English and dealt with the heckler. So that's kind of what I thought about Andrade. Now I see people have sent me a ton of DMs about this Bernard Hopkins clip and him saying that you got to be a serial stalker. You have to stalk Canelo. This is Canelo's former promoter. Bernard Hopkins, absolutely works with Golden Boy. That has been the case, and they work together. Now, I have multi feelings about this, multi different feelings when it comes to this, because you can argue like, oh, Demetrius Andrade, you know, has been avoided by Canelo. I've always told you that, you know, for several years or whatever. But my thing is this: if I told you if Andrade was going to run up on Canelo, I think he should have. It would have looked better at 54 if he did it, or at 160. Now you have Bhop telling him, hey, what you just did with Canelo, that's the only way that you can even force the issue. So they're going to try to kick you out of the buildings and get security on you, but you got to basically press him and put that pressure on Canelo. We'll see, you know, we'll see if it, at this point, pressure bursts pipes or makes diamonds. We'll see what happens. Bhop was dropping gems. People are talking about it. The other thing that's a bit confusing with the timing is this: two things. One, Andrade hasn't fought at 168. So Canelo has successfully avoided Andrade long enough to get out of the whole division that he fights in. So at 168, since Andrade has no body of work and he's coming off of the Liam Williams performance, I don't know if that's going to be the #1 fight that people want to see. You guys can let me know in the comment section. In my opinion, I think a fight with Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez, or even like maybe a Caleb Plant, would be more ahead of the queue. But we'll see if Andrade can make it interesting by taking this newfound information from Bhop and chasing Canelo down. You know, I think there is going to be pressure on Canelo as well. The walls are closing in. But before I get to that, let me talk about the other thing. I told you I had a couple different thoughts on timing. You have to, just being a fair critic in boxing and someone who looks at these situations and fairly assesses them, you have to question Bernard Hopkins' timing as well, because the whole time Bernard Hopkins was with Golden Boy and Canelo was with Golden Boy simultaneously, we never heard this type of instruction from Bernard Hopkins. So, you know, I know a lot of people are getting hyped up and say, oh yeah, Bernard Hopkins, he exposed Canelo. And, you know, Andrade's posting it on his story, the interaction and things like that. But you got to look at it. At the end of the day, Bernard Hopkins wasn't saying this type of stuff when they had Canelo. So it could be a little bit of spoiled grapes, if you will. And the fact that Canelo has gotten out of a lawsuit, you know, they've settled with Golden Boy and he's away from Golden Boy. Now Bernard Hopkins is giving you a little bit more of his truest feelings on the matter. But I can say I don't recall Bernard Hopkins acting this way when Canelo was signed to them. So it makes you wonder about ulterior motives, because I remember, not necessarily with Andrade, but I remember with Charlo, there was an interview, it was like a media scrum where a bunch of reporters were at a Canelo fight or whatever the case is, and Bhop was sitting down and being interviewed, and the question of Charlo at 160 happened, and Bernard Hopkins wasn't saying about Charlo, who everybody wanted to see Canelo fight. Still, people want to see Canelo fight. He wasn't saying to be a serial stalker and, you know, hunt Canelo down. That's the only way to get the fight. He was like, Charlo got to do something, dog. That's the only way. He has to do more and see more. And then as soon as Canelo left Golden Boy, Bernard Hopkins started saying he wants to see the Charlo fight, and that's a tough fight for Canelo, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. So we got to take these into consideration and be fair. Bernard Hopkins has definitely switched his tune since Canelo has left. And that's just in all fairness. You know, like I do on my channel, I try to give you guys the latest and greatest, but real breakdowns and real assessment. So I can definitely attest to Bhop has this newfound energy since Canelo has left regarding that. But regardless of that, now that that's out the window, we'll see. We'll see if Demetrius Andrade can continue the Cannon Briggs, Clubber Lang approach and put pressure on Canelo to get the fight, even though he's not at 168. There's other fights. But I do think this is a great positioning for Caleb Plant. Let's talk about that. Here's why. Caleb Plant, he is the key master. Canelo says he wants undisputed. The only way he can achieve that in this new division, because keep in mind, Canelo, as I said earlier, Canelo Alvarez said he wanted to be undisputed in 160, and then all of a sudden he abandoned that abort mission for whatever reason. Now Caleb Plant is in a very good position, right? Because he's a guy that stays in shape, tricky style. He has an American style. He has some slickness, has some power. And most importantly, Canelo, according to what he's told people recently, he needs that belt and he wants undisputed. He wants to be the first Mexican, because we've just seen Jose Ramirez had an opportunity at undisputed over the weekend with Josh Taylor and he fell flat. So Canelo, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, he would be the first Mexican fighter of Mexican descent to be undisputed in a division. You know, because we've seen Terrence Crawford recently, like I just said, we've seen Josh Taylor, we've seen Bernard Hopkins, who gave the advice to Andrade, Jermaine Taylor, Lennox Lewis. You know, we've seen some different undisputed. Usyk, I don't know if I said him, right? Terrence Crawford. But I don't recall a fighter of Mexican ethnicity that had undisputed. So I think Caleb Plant, sweet hands, he's in a sweet position because according to reports, he says $10 million is about right. So if Caleb Plant doesn't get $10 million, there's a lot of lofty, exciting fights for him on PBC. You know, if Danny Jacobs comes back, maybe something like that. You could fight if Jamal Charlo moves up. You also have David Benavidez and Caleb Plant, which has been brewing. You could put him in a stay busy fight. Looks like he did good numbers in Tennessee, things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next move is, because if Canelo Alvarez cannot get Caleb Plant, because this is what Canelo said. Canelo says if Caleb Plant is asking for too much money, then we're not going to give him the fight. But it'll be a bad look for Canelo Alvarez if he doesn't fight at least Caleb Plant, because the people that I want to see Canelo fight the most, not necessarily in order, would be David Benavidez, Jamal Charlo, Caleb Plant, or even a DEMETRIUS Booboo Andrade. So if Canelo doesn't make it work in September and try to get this last little strap by fighting Caleb Plant, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him for another event, because he's already went through all the European. He went through this European world tour and fought Austin Powers and Adele and Elton John. He already fought all these Eastern European and European fighters, right? So there's one more relevant Caucasian fighter in this division with a belt, and that's Caleb Plant. Or you're going to have to make a big fight with somebody else. I personally have zero interest, like I've told you, in seeing Canelo versus Triple G Part 3. At this point, it's a dud. So depending on what happens with Caleb Plant, this could be very interesting. If Caleb, you know, he's in a position of power. Even though Canelo's the A side, he's in a great position of power. You have Andrade, and Bhop is telling him to keep chasing him, keep hunting him down, take no for an answer, be like a throwback fighter, and make Canelo sweat. Make his people call security on you and keep kicking you out and these different types of things. So I can't wait. You know, boxing is lit. There's a lot of recent announcements. Pacquiao Spence, that's a big fight. If Manny Pacquiao at age 42 can fight a young, hungry lion like Errol Spence and a 2-belt champion, then Canelo, who is supposed to be the face of boxing, I even put him number 1 pound for pound at the moment, right? Based on body of work in its totality. That also comes with pressure. When Mayweather was number 1, and trust me, Mayweather, he was a clear number 1. Canelo, you know, is debatable, still subjective. I don't think Canelo is a clear-cut, you know, front runner for number 1 the same way Floyd Mayweather was. When Floyd Mayweather, it was like nobody could dispute this was the number 1 star in boxing. Right now, it's a little bit subjective. You have Terrence Crawford, who's very skilled, highly skilled, but based on politics, bad business decisions, etc., hasn't always been able to get the names that he needs. Same thing with Andrade and, you know, other guys like that. Errol Spence is up there, Jamal Charlo, Josh Taylor, a lot of good fighters, but it's going to be interesting. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what's next, because there's a lot of pressure on Canelo. You want to be the number 1 guy, or you want people to call you the number 1 guy, then it comes with the number 1 pressure. You got to fight one of these tough fights that people want to see. And if you don't fight Caleb Plant, like I said, he has a lot of leverage here, because if you don't fight Caleb Plant, then people are going to be expecting you to fight one of the other tough fights and not Gennady Golovkin. Golovkin is 39. You've already had 24 rounds with him. I don't know anyone really requesting that fight outside of old media. So let me know what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know how I did. Let me know what you think of Bhop's advice to Demetrius Andrade to keep pressuring, keep putting pressure on Canelo. Drop your comments as always. Hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video is Ego signing off.